Thank you, everyone, for joining us and for being on time. Sure, we'll have plenty more people trickling in as we go. My name is Roger Tower. I'm the CMO of Cannabis Resource Corporation. We're a family of companies, including Cannabis Real Estate Consultants, CREC Compliance, Blue Water Government Affairs, and the CREC Directory, all within our CREC network. As part of the CREC Directory, we feature trusted partners in the industry that will help support your growth in the B2B cannabis industry. Today's topic is on the uncomfortable yet important subject of robberies from retail and cultivation facilities. Recently, there's been a large increase in theft, and with the cash-heavy nature and infancy of the industry, it makes cannabis a prime target. Today, we're going to dive a lot deeper in keeping your assets secure, mitigating risks, and how you can continue to grow further in the professional industry. Please welcome Jesse Parente, National Director of 9 Point Strategies.
Hi, Jesse Parente. I want to say thank you. I'm the founder and national director of 9 Point Strategies. 9 Point Strategies is a national risk management firm that has been supporting and protecting the cannabis industry for over a decade. We provide insurance placement, HR, OSHA safety, and employee benefits. Currently protecting over 450 publicly held companies, MSOs, and vertically integrated operations throughout the United States. I'm very excited to introduce two of the leading consulting firms for cannabis protection throughout the United States. First, I'd like to introduce Michael Verden, founder and CEO of the Lake Forest Group. They are a strategic security consulting firm. Mike is also the former security service agent, a police officer, and senior director of the security for the NBA. Next, I'd like to introduce Tony Gallo. Tony is also the managing partner of the Sapphire Risk Advisor Group. They are considered one of the top top security firms in the cannabis industry. Tony has been in the industry since 2013 and has worked with over 600 clients in 35 states and Canada, designing their security program from application to operations. Tony was recognized this year by High Times Magazine as 100 most influential cannabis people. Gentlemen, welcome, and I really appreciate the education you're going to provide for us today. Mike, I'd like to turn it on to you and let you go from there.
Thank you, Jesse, and welcome to the audience today. As you can see by the title, Preventing Robberies. And we won't just talk about what to do if a robbery occurs. We're going to have a tremendous focus on preventing that type of incident from occurring in the first place. I want to talk about my background for a second. I'm not going to go line by line, but what's really important to remember when it comes to this industry, when you look at security, security cuts across all different industries. If you look at my background, you look next to the Lake Forest Group, that fifth or sixth bullet under experience. I've done work in healthcare, I've done work in pharma, and I've done work in gaming. And all of those industries have tremendous relevancy to the cannabis industry. So when you think about security, to really get a good perspective, you just can't focus on cannabis businesses. You really need to focus on the big picture and kind of get best practices from other industries. I'm going to talk about a couple of the unique challenges in the cannabis industry. I'm Illinois-based, so I will use some Illinois examples, but I'm a former federal agent, and I'm with you on this. It's still a Schedule I drug. We have the 19 recreational, 39 medical. You would expect at some point that would no longer be at least a Schedule I drug. That's with heroin and LSD. Banking, I think, as Jesse or Roger had said, it's still cash, primarily a cash business, which makes it a higher risk when it comes to to crime. This thing with taxes, the feds look at the revenue, if you can believe this or not, as money laundering, because your gains are from a Schedule I drug. Once again, it's the law. I hope at some point they will change it. And then the black market. My next slide addresses that. This is from 3 years ago, but the correlation is this. The bad guys, when we talk about robberies, for example, what's their motive? Well, their motive is to steal it and sell it. And right now, as you can see from those slides, the street price has you beat. So they're trying to move your product at a discount rate. Like I said, I'm going to use a couple of examples from Illinois. The first one is just, with a patient, medical marijuana, but having to have that identification card on their person. But every state has their own nuances, and one overriding theme to Tony's remarks and my remarks today is compliance. If you want to have a baseline for your business when it comes to security, here's your baseline, meaning you can't go below it. You have to comply with the state. If I write a security plan, if Tony writes a security plan, at a very minimum, we're going to comply with the state. In some of these states, we got to give some credit to. I will give credit to Illinois that they were very detailed when they came out with their requirements for security for a cannabis business, whether it be a cultivation, dispensary, et cetera. So you have to comply. Here's an example: 24-hour video surveillance. Think about that, around the clock, and that can get expensive. That's a lot of video data to be recorded. And also the alarms. You need to have these alarms in place. If you don't, you're at a risk of losing your license. And then from an ethical standpoint, it's good to have these features. Also notification. They're really big on notification. So if you did have a robbery, for example, in Illinois, you're going to make 2 notifications: the state police and Department of Agriculture. If you don't, once again, they're going to come in there, they're going to audit your business, and it's not going to end well. And also, not just something like a theft or a diversion. Let's say you had damage there. You had some type of fire, for example. You have to notify the state. If you don't, once again, you're going to place your business at risk. So we're going to talk about a security plan today. All roads lead back to a security plan. No matter what you can think of, I'm going to go through with the next several slides. What are the guts of a security plan? I'm basically going to give you a table of contents. And our experience has taught us this, and once again, I'll use Illinois as the example. Your security plan, when you apply for that license, is 25% of your overall score. So if you don't hit it out of the park with your security plan, you're not going to get enough points to get awarded the license. And there's a lot of states like that. And that's not a subjective opinion. That's just the way the states look at this. And I'm not focusing on just the application for the license. I'm also talking about once you're in business. You better have a good security plan, or you're going to be at risk with things like the robberies we're seeing. And to be transparent on this, Tony and I operate nationally. Most of these robberies are happening in the West, the far West, like Oregon, the Washington area. I'm not painting with broad strokes there. That's what the data is telling us. I'm seeing a lot of crime in Illinois, as the world knows, but I'm not seeing marijuana robberies. Record keeping is extremely important in this. I'll talk more about that. But you've heard the term seed to sale. Get that out of your head. It's cradle to grave. And I say that because you're also responsible for tracking that cannabis. Let's say you had a damaged packaging, right? You have to destroy the product. You have to account for that. Where was destroyed, how it was destroyed, when it was destroyed, and who destroyed it. Same with residue. So they cover the life cycle of that product. And also, back to these states, if you're operating, whatever state you're operating in, you better have people licensed in that state to do your security. As I said, here is your 30,000-foot look at a security plan. And to be clear, all of these categories are related. And if you think you can focus on one thing like personnel and not focus on something else like policy, that's not a security plan. They all have to work together. There is I think, a misnomer out there about security. The old cliche was guards, gates, and guns. That has nothing to do with security. It's 1,000 times more detailed than that. So like your operations, that's your personnel, that's your shipping, your receiving, your transportation, your loading dock. I already talked about, when I say reporting a loss or theft, how do you do it? It's not just picking up the phone. To do it right, you're going to have some type of format, like a report, for example, that asks all the right questions and records all the right information. And I'm not talking about a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet. You should have an automated case management system. And that way you can also just hit send. And I use that example of the Department of Agriculture and Illinois State Police. You hit send and the proper authorities get the information real time. I still see a lot of operations trying to save some money, and they got a Word document, and they're also inconsistent in what they report. everything I say, I'm almost like a broken record, but you can have every bell and whistle known to man. The best cameras, you can have armed guards and dogs. That's just an exaggeration. But my point is, if you don't have training, and if your people don't know what to do, then none of the other stuff matters. You have to have a very dynamic training program. Best example is the subject matter today is robberies. You have to train your employees on what to do if there's a robbery. Because if you don't, then it's going to go from bad to worse. So that training has to be there, not just for things like some type of incident, but even operating your equipment, operating your cameras, your card readers, your tracking systems. Technology is wonderful, but you have to know how to operate it. The technologies are right there in front of you. We'll talk more about that as we go through it. Tony's going to explain it in really good detail about your intrusion detection system. The security plan, believe it or not, this section right here is your most detailed section. You have physical security, you have personnel, you have technology, right? This is your most detailed section. This is where you really have to hit it out of the park and provide great detail and also instruction on how to secure your business. Next, management. When we say facility management, and you know this, even if your business is not a 24/7 business. Now, some manufacturing, production, cultivations could run 24/7, but most businesses don't, right? So when you're talking, I say business, dispensary, for example, or store, regardless, you got to protect that venue 24/7. And so you have to approach it from that mindset. So what is done on a 24/7 basis to keep that property, building, and people safe? One example that is power supply. So not just the power supply that you have, what is your contingency power supply? How many grids come into your location? In urban settings, you may get more than one grid for electricity. A more suburban or rural section, you have to have a generator. Most states require it, but you better have a good one that can run for a long period of time. So I'm going to talk about access control. So when we say access control, on that left side, that is what has to be controlled, right? Coming into your business. The simple beginning is people. When we say people, all kinds of people, and I'll get into that on the right side, but people, the product comes into your building, cash, mail, packages, equipment, right? It's all coming into your business. Vehicles, and then you have your employees bringing personal items into the business, and then they have to bring those personal items out of the business. But we can talk about robbery until the cows come home. But if you want to talk about probability, the worst thing that can happen to you is probably a robbery, armed robbery. That's the most dangerous. No arguing about that. However, the most probable theft is going to be internal. It could be diverting that product through the supply chain, or as we call the pathway, or it could just be an employee, taking some product out the back door. So how do you guard against that? And we'll talk about that. Different access areas. Tony's got a great floor plan. He's going to show you that. But in simple matters, the controlled access is getting into your building or getting onto your property. Like back to cultivation, manufacturing, production, you can control that. You don't have customers coming on. So you can control access onto the property. Limited is once they're in the building, for example, beyond that lobby, all right, that's going to be limited. And then if they do get back there for whatever reason, they could be a vendor or contractor, for example, they still have limited access. Where you have your product, for example, whether it's stored or being produced, that's restricted and they can't get back there. And like I said, Tony is going to show you a great floor plan. That people, here's your people example. That's who you have to account for. And how do you separate them? How do you determine who goes where? Don't forget about, back to your policies, procedures, escorts. Make it mandatory to have these people escorted. Security operations. So on the left is your physical security. And there's your perimeter. Fencing and gates isn't applicable to everything, back to a dispensary or a store, but it is applicable to an industrial type of facility. I mentioned the generator, lighting. Lighting is critically important. Lighting works with your cameras, and your cameras work with your lighting. So you have to think about how well lit your exterior property is. Doors and locks, it's your hardware. Can't be overlooked. When I get involved with the client, I'm not a locksmith. I'm not an expert on locks, but you bring an expert in to make sure that you have a proprietary keyway system too. So nobody can duplicate your keys. Little things like protective window film. And I shouldn't say little, that's the wrong word, because a lot of states require that. So if you don't have it, you're going to get gigged on your security plan. The right side is you have to look at your business as an organization, almost like a mini corporation. There's got to be structure there, not just structure for the purpose of the security plan for the scoring system, and structure for the purpose of operating the business. And that's just an example of what it would look like. But you should have people responsible for all different operations for that business. Storage, just think about what needs to be stored. You're back to your currency and your product. You've got safes, you've got vaults. Also, when you transport it, the vehicle is storing the product and the currency. There's also containers within the vehicle that are storing this. They may have GPS on them. How are they locked? I love the dual lock system where the guy delivering it can open it as long as the receiver can open it. And that's back to a best practice and the best way to protect yourselves, right? The ID badges, who makes the badge? And then where is that stock kept? And also, who turns the badge on? Who turns the badge off? Who has access? These badges are pretty sophisticated. They can program it for the hours of the day and where they can go within that facility. And 2-factor, 3-factor, it's basically, it's right there in front of you. 2-factor will add the card reader, and then 3-factor is a biometric reader. I see 3-factor where you keep the actual product. If you have like an inventory like this safe, for example, you could put 3-factor in there. I talked about the dual custody lock. I talked about, you're going to have a specific area, like for example, in a cultivation facility where the product is destroyed. Technologies, like I said, Tony will talk about intrusion detection. I won't get into that, but you can see the camera system unobstructed. They want every square foot covered to the best of your ability. When we say every square foot, obviously not locker rooms, not restrooms, but for the most part. And so when we say unobstructed coverage, you got to be in sync with your people designing the interior of your facility and the outside and your architects, just like how lights on the inside, how far they are from the ceiling. They can't hang down because then they're blocking the line of sight of the camera. Product tracking, they have wonderful systems now. They can track the product throughout its life cycle. And then monitoring. Monitoring is critically important. Are you monitoring the system on site? If you are, it should be a security office. Do you have backup to that monitoring? So let's just say if there was, let's say there's a flood, because floods do happen, or utility failure, do you have a backup to that monitoring station? It could be a third party that can also then take over all of your systems, your cameras, your alarms, your card readers. Transportation security is extremely detailed. And I can even use my example as a Secret Service agent. When have we seen presidents shot at? We've seen them when they're in transit. You look at Reagan, you look at Kennedy, you look at Ford. I know I'm aging myself, but just bear with me. They weren't sitting around, they were moving. If they're gonna hit somebody transporting cash, well, I'll say if they're gonna hit somebody with cash and product, they're gonna hit them while they're moving. So you got to have procedures in place in case something does happen. You have to have notification protocols in place. Your people, and it could be a third party or it could be your own people that are transporting the product and cash. Do they know what to do? Do they know who to call? I can tell you one example is this: when a product is dropped off, one person always remains in the vehicle. You never take two guys outside the vehicle, then you've lost complete control of everything. So training, even evasive techniques with training is important when it comes to the transportation. Policies and procedures, emergency management. Let's use robbery again. So there's 3 different types of emergency: natural, a weather event; accidental, power failure; intentional. So a robbery, what do you do? There's run, hide, fight, right? But it's not just run, hide, fight, because robbery is somebody with a weapon. Let's be clear on that. Unless they may have a knife, but they have a weapon, not just a gun. But have your employees been trained on what to do if that occurs? There's a lockdown procedure. There's an evacuation procedure. There's a hide. You have safe rooms. Who do you notify? It gets very detailed. Background screening, insider threat. You better be background screening all of your employees. Code of conduct, that's just putting people on notice as to what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. I won't go through all of these, but I will talk about searching and screening, lessons that I learned from the gaming industry. You know, I've seen operations, especially in where they manufacture, produce, and grow. Employees are screened on the way in and they're screened on the way out. Vehicles, same thing, because it's back to anti-diversion. And loading dock operations, you know, you still, a lot of times you have no control who's bringing the product to you. So you better have good safeguards in place. There's a thing called a sally port where the vehicle pulls in and it's basically fenced in behind and in front. And once that vehicle has been cleared, like a security officer determines, okay, these guys are legitimate. They may show an order of lading, which is what is in the vehicle. Once they've been cleared, then that front gate opens up and they pull into your property. That's my remarks. This is my contact information, but we're going to leave time at the very end for a Q&A. I'm going to hand it over to Tony, and here is Mr. Tony Gallo.
Thank you, Mike. Very informative. A lot of information there for everyone to take in. My name is Tony Gallo. Next slide. I am the managing partner of Sapphire Risk Advisor Group. We have been in the cannabis industry since 2013. We've worked with about 600 clients in 35 states, and we do three things. We help with the application round, and very successful with that in many states, including Illinois, Mike's area, New Jersey, and California. We've also done over 70 build-outs of the cannabis security for facilities, from a 450,000 square foot grow to a 1,500 square foot dispensary in North Dakota, and then we do policies and procedures. One of the things we do is robbery policies and procedures. Next slide. And in that time, I've been involved in the robbery industry, having worked for companies like Sears and Macy's. And during that time, I've been involved in over 2,000 retail armed robbery investigations. And just to be clear, what we're talking about today when it comes to robbery awareness, a robbery is an act or an instance of unlawful taking the property of another by the use of violence or intimidation. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, someone cuts a hole in your dispensary and drops down. That's not a robbery, that's a break-in or a burglary. This is something where an act of violence occurs that someone is going to try and get some property or cash from you. Next slide. So looking at robberies, I think a lot of people initially feel, oh, if I'm in a robbery, I'm going to get killed, or if I'm in a robbery, especially a retail robbery. Like I said, I've dealt with anything from pawn shop, liquor stores, convenience stores, firearm stores, pharmaceutical stores, and obviously cannabis. 87% of all armed robberies are not violent. Now, that doesn't mean that you want to be in one, but I think a lot of times people are concerned that they're going to be injured, and 87% of the time, most of those robberies you are not. Luckily, even in the cannabis industry, that holds true. Next slide. So when we look at the typical cannabis robbery, there are two types. First one is cash robbery. Next slide. And a cash robbery is pretty much the most normal one. The robber is only looking for cash. They usually steal from the cash drawer. They come up to the register and they take the cash, and they're in and out of the location of the dispensary in 60 seconds. Same thing would occur in any other kind of retail establishment. The majority of the robberies that occur are because people want cash. Next slide. The second one is product, cannabis robbery of product. The robber is targeting not only cash, which they always will want, but their main target is getting cannabis. If you're going to have a dispensary robbery where the product is the main focus, they're a little longer, usually still under 3 minutes, but a little longer to get the product out of the cases or out of the back room, and their focus is in and out as quickly as possible. Majority of the incidents of security that occur in a grow or cultivation are break-ins, of course, but we do have occasions where a robbery will be attempted. And again, that's mainly a focus on the cannabis product. Next slide. So it could be worse. A lot of times, like I said, I mentioned just before, although the cannabis industry has threats of robbery, and they are increasing year after year, but so is the store counts increasing year after year. They're well below what we call the big four, and that is alcohol, tobacco, firearms, pharmaceutical, and cannabis. Alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and then the pharmaceutical cannabis industry. These are 4 industries that are very similar in a lot of ways, simply because the product is very desirable and very quickly to sell on the street. Do shirt stores get robbed and bicycle stores get robbed? Of course they do. But it'd be a lot more difficult selling a bicycle on the street than it would be to sell a bottle of alcohol or a firearm or tobacco or cannabis or Oxycontin. Next slide. So what is the purpose of your security plan? Mike did a great job mentioning and designing what a security plan should be. And this is an important aspect of your robbery awareness training, plus how to prevent any losses and the safety of your employees, your customers, your patients. Next slide. So the security plan's main purpose. First purpose would be to make sure that everyone is safe that comes to your location, whether it's a cultivation, a delivery, a lab, manufacturing, or a dispensary. You want to make sure that you are safeguarding your employees, your patients, and the visitors that come into your location. Second aspect is you want to make sure you protect your product, whether it's cannabis or cannabis product or CBD or hemp. Your desire there is to make sure that that product is safe, because obviously we do not want that product out on the street. And then you want a process that's going to be able to determine if there's actually any losses occurring, whether there's losses occurring from the cash, whether losses are occurring from the inventory of the product, and how you go about designing that audit. Next slide. So we're going to look at a couple of topics: facility security, security surveillance, product security, and policies and procedures. Mike did a great job working us through a lot of these already. So hopefully I can reinforce some of that. So let's look at the first one. Next slide. So a security plan, the facility security, probably one of the most important parts of your security plan. The state's going to require you have it. Your construction company is going to need it. And then also it's going to help you as you design your actual written security plan. Next slide. So we're going to look at, this is a dispensary, a pretty basic security plan of a dispensary. We've built about 70 of these across the United States. Pretty standard. Average dispensary in the United States is somewhere around 3,000 square feet, give or take. You have security at the front. Security in where you're checking in the vestibule, either medical ID or a driver's license, depending what state you are. You enter the dispensary through a waiting room or straight into the dispensary, and then in the red you see is the back area where all of the products are secured. In robbery awareness, your security really starts at the beginning. And having camera systems that can see facial recognition of people pulling up, license plate recognition, the view of anyone entering your facility will greatly reduce the losses or the chances of robberies occurring. If you ask me, most of the robberies that we've seen now in Oregon and Washington, I've been involved and been looking at a lot of them. I'll look at those locations and say, yeah, the front of that location, it was dirty. There was graffiti on the wall. The lighting system wasn't proper. And this is even before you walked into those locations, that you can see the majority of the time when I do a robbery investigation, I'm able to determine that the robbery actually occurred prior to them even entering the facility because of the appearance that you gave. So that's very important. Next slide. Same thing with a cultivation facility. This is a small flower room facility, but you can see them throughout the United States. And again, where are we placing our security when you enter the facility? Where are the camera placement? Where's the vault? Probably one of the most important areas. And where's your cash being stored in a cultivation? You don't want this to happen, but if someone broke into, say, flower room 1 and grabbed 10 plants, I don't want it to happen, but in all honesty, I'd rather them do that than to break into the vault and steal 10 bags of cannabis that's been already trimmed and dried and processed. So again, the design of your security and preventing robberies and keeping yourself safe begins on the outside of the building. Once they're in the building, once the robbery is moving on, there's only so much you're going to be able to do. You want to prevent this robbery from ever occurring. Next slide. So let's talk a little about cameras. A lot of camera placements are definitely not proper. You do not need a camera over the top. Now we're talking about robberies. We're not talking about the placement of cameras to identify transactions at the POS system or an ATM camera. You need to identify the faces. You need to also see the hands, and you need to be able to identify that transaction, which is what I refer to as a robbery, how it occurs when it comes from cash or cannabis and how that's going. So camera positions are very important. It's important for 2 reasons. Obviously, one is to prevent losses or to reduce the chance of losses. You walk in, you see yourself immediately on camera, you say it's not worth it, I'm gonna go rob the other dispensary down the street. Or you want to be able to identify those individuals quickly so that the police can do an investigation and take these individuals off the street, whether it's their car, whether it's their facial look, whether it's the clothes they're wearing, and be able to reduce that robbery from occurring somewhere else. Next slide. So we do video surveillance. We have facial recognition now. You can track people. We have geofencing, where we're able to place cameras that form a virtual fence line. Some states allow you not to have a fence, and a lot. We just did a grow in New Jersey where we actually did geofencing instead of fence line. You can do object tracking if need be, or the license plate recognition. A lot of Illinois locations have a requirement. A lot of states require license recognition. We utilize that. Some states even allow you to do audio detection, where if you can identify if a robbery is occurring and react to that quickly through any of the AI technology. Next slide. So limited access, Mike said I was going to talk a little bit about that. Controlling the access points, and I'm talking primarily today about robbery prevention. If you have to be buzzed into the vestibule, that's one barrier. Now I have to show my ID. That's another barrier before I can even get into where the product in the cache is. And that's all controlled by access, whether it's a proximity card or a biometric reader, but certain areas restricting that and making it difficult. Remember, what a robber wants to be in and out as quickly as possible. Limited access and limiting that access from one point to another will greatly reduce the likelihood of you being robbed. Next slide. So security devices out also, glass break detection, someone breaks the glass, it sets off the alarm. Motion detectors, someone's in an area that they shouldn't be, at the arrest code. Every single alarm system in the United States has a code on the keypad that you punch in that will turn off the alarm system if someone got you at the beginning of the day, but tell the alarm company that you are in duress. The majority of the cannabis owners that I speak to do not know what that code is. You ask yourself and asked around, what is that code in the keypad? Most of them were not instructed on what it is, or if they were at the time of install, they now have forgotten it. Hold up buttons. Panic buttons. These are emergency buttons that are placed at the registers or in certain areas such as the check-in room or the security room or even the vault room, which can silently alert the police that there's a robbery or something bad is going on. Siren and strobe, I wouldn't recommend that for the robbery prevention part, but definitely a siren and strobe outside to reduce break-ins is something that's definitely a mandatory part of your security program. And obviously lighting. I can't stress the importance of that parking lot looking clean, the trash gone, well lit, just communicating, don't come to rob us, it's not worth it. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about safes and the importance of safes. During the looting that occurred, well, almost a year and a half ago, we were involved with 86 dispensary break-in investigations that we helped or were aware of. And of the 86, we came to realize that a lot of stores were not using the appropriate safe. If you were going to put $100,000 in cash of your own money, you wouldn't put it in a gun safe. Gun safes are exactly designed for that use. They're gun safes. You would use the same safes that jewelry stores use or that other high-risk stores would use, and that's a TL-rated safe. TL-rated safe is a commercial safe that's designed to withstand an attack for at least 30 minutes of the front of that location. Next slide. So why not the gun safe? Gun safe is designed exactly for guns. So on the West Coast, before regulations came into play, where you see how security in the cannabis industry has greatly increased going west to east in the United States, and I call Mississippi the dividing line. A gun safe is designed with a very thin piece of metal, that I can cut by going to Home Depot and buying a cutting saw, and inside is sheetrock. Well, it's really a great design because sheetrock absorbs heat. Think about what a gun safe is. You're putting guns inside, majority of the time, your home. And if there was ever a fire, those guns would be protected by the sheetrock. It's really not designed to withstand an attack. It's designed to have a little lock on it and a little bit of security so your son or little Johnny cannot open the safe, but it's not designed and should never, ever be in a cannabis facility. Of the 86 break-ins that occurred that we were aware of, 23 of them had their safes breached. All 23 of them were gun safes. None of them were TL-rated safes. And we're talking hundreds, if not millions of dollars of cash and products stolen. Next slide. Here are some of those safes. As you can see, quite easy to cut into. Very thin piece of metal, sheetrock, perfect design, excellent for guns. Keep your guns in there. Don't keep your cash. Don't keep your cannabis. These all safes come from dispensaries throughout the United States, and as you can see, were quickly breached. Next slide. These are TL-rated safes. Same scenario. As you can see how these safes are made, the concrete and reinforced rebar inside prevented the initial piece of metal was cut through, but no one gained entrance into these safes. So spending a little bit more money, not going to Costco, not going to Walmart, not trying to design your security from the cheapest point of view. You can pay for it now or you're going to pay for it in the future. Next slide. Same thing with display cases. And during a robbery, someone's going to may want to get product. If you're not able to open up those display cases quickly, they may want to smash that glass. If it's just straight glass, they're going to smash it and they're going to get in and they're going to scoop up the product in that display case. Taking a page from the jewelry industry or the pawn shop industry. Have shatterproof resistant glass. 3M makes a very good product, a 15mm film that you can put on the glass, or you can buy the glass just that way. Also your front windows, if you're not going to have hurricane roll downs at night, put some sort of resistant glass on that. Now, obviously, you're not going to keep cannabis products out on display after closing, but you still do not want people breaching in and coming into your location and ransacking and doing damage if all they're going to do is just destroy the window and then leave. Next slide. Product security, very important. Mike alluded to cash boxes. If you look in the middle, we do security for some of the largest MSOs nationwide. The cash box is kind of our secret trade in some ways. A lot of the dispensaries now have that. Think about this. If I'm going to go rob a dispensary and I can rob dispensary A and get away with $10,000 worth of cash, which is what's sitting in the register, or I can rob dispensary B and get away $500 of cash because right under the register, I have this little cash box that all 50s and 100s and all money over X amount of money is immediately put in there. At the end of the shift, I unopen this box, cost you roughly around $100, these boxes. I remove that cash, and then I go to the back room and count it. Who do you think they're going to be more inclined to rob? If you look at the robberies that are occurring now on the West Coast, there's a lot of repeat robberies going on, and they know exactly who to rob and who not to rob. Top left corner is a Trident door alarm for the emergency system. Emergency doors, that system is designed to prevent anyone from prying a door open from the back end and then running in and attacking anyone in the store. Definitely a much needed device. And some of these other product security, you see the alarm panel on the far right, which I told you the emergency code. Every alarm system has that code. You just don't remember it. And then the panic button on the left and the strobe lights up in the top right corner. Next slide. So what is your main goal during a robbery? Main goal during the robbery it's a very easy question. Next slide. Your main goal in a robbery, which you should be training your staff and your people, whether it's a cultivation facility or what is a dispensary, is to get the robber out of the store. That's the most important thing you can do. A lot of people say, well, what if I use I lock them in? Well, why would you want to lock in a desperate person who came into your location with a gun or knife or whatever? Why would you want to lock him in your facility at that point and have you and him and the rest of your people and your customers all locked in? You want him in, you want him out as quickly as possible. And then we'll look at that security to see how we can improve on that. Next slide. The reason is because the level of violence and the level of losses increase as long as that robber spends in the store. If you have a robber who's not nervous and is spending a very little amount of time, the level of violence is low, losses are usually small, most of the time it's cash. But as that level of time spent in there, the robber gets more nervous, that violence increases, and the losses and the cash and the cannabis increase, and so does the chances of injury increase. So you really want to focus, and that's a communication with your staff that you want to have, is we want, if we have great security here, we've done everything we're supposed to do, but if we ever did have a robbery, the goal is for that robber to get out as quickly as possible. Next slide. So, what can I do to reduce this? Awareness is the key. There's many solutions developed to address these challenges. And a lot of that comes from other industries, very similar. I think a lot of times people are under some misconception that the cannabis industry is unique. Your cannabis industry is a retail industry. There are other similar retail companies, as I alluded to, that have guns and gold and diamonds and tobacco and lottery tickets and alcohol that you can learn from. And that's where a lot of the education that we communicate to our clients nationwide is that we're learning things that actually have been proven and have worked in the past. Next slide. So, as Mike said, train your staff, a good security operations manual, one that someone's going to really use, an employee handbook. Are there any awareness posters? For instance, ask your people, what do you do if there was a robbery? You'd be surprised how many people would give you the wrong answer. Oh, I would lunge for the gun, or I would try and stab them, or I wouldn't cooperate with them, or whatever. What's your security training? What is your reviews and audits? What is your robbery awareness program? And what have you trained your people to do? What happens if someone comes in them in the middle as they're entering into the store and they try and rob them as they enter into that store? What is their instructions to do? Or as they're leaving and they all leave? And there are procedures that greatly reduce robberies, and a very common way is at opening and closing. What's your opening and closing procedures when it comes to reducing robberies? And Mike and I train on that. Emergency planning, again, what to do in case there is an emergency, such as a robbery occurrence. What's the next action? What do you do once that robber leaves? Next slide. So final thoughts. Again, I think we're stressing today, your security plan is a major part of your application. A well-defined security program will keep you in business. And I think that's kind of important, that line. You could pass the state application license, or the city and then the state application, get your license, spend your money, build out your facility. But if you don't have a good security plan, it's going to eat your margins. Mike alluded to that, where your losses occur. And I have an expression, friends steal, friends steal, family members steal more. Employee theft is by far your biggest challenge. So what is your security program going to do to reduce handouts, underwriting, cash theft, product being stolen? What are the trimmers, so forth, and what's that security there? And then the next thing is, what do you do with high-risk businesses, and what's the ideas for that? Your security program must stay and be a state of mind. Next slide. So, well, thank you for listening to me. This is my information. If you want to have, you can scan that QR code if you want it to right away. And Mike and I are here to help you in any way. And I think I'm going to open it up, Jesse, back to you for any questions you might have. Thank you.
Tony, Michael, thank you. That was a ton of great information. You've definitely helped educate us on a proactive approach versus a lot of a reactive approach that everyone has. Unfortunately, this doesn't come to play until, unfortunately, someone has something bad happen. So I really appreciate the education and the thoroughness on the detail that is needed. We definitely have some Q&A we want, and I'm going to actually let Roger kind of lead the Q&A, and then based on certain things, I may chime in a little bit on the insurance aspect, because insurance, when it comes to security, is hand in hand. Your insurance contracts will not provide coverage if your warranties are not supported by everything that Tony and Mike spoke about today. So thank you again for reinforcing that, and look forward to some Q&A. Roger, I'll let you handle for here.
All right, thank you. Wow, yeah, we touched a lot of issues. Thank you, everyone, for moving quickly. The slides and the PowerPoint and recording will be available on cannabisrealestateconsultants.com blog. I'll be trying to get it up over the next couple of days. Yeah, I got a good amount of questions, so I'm just going to run through it. Guys, please just say if you want to answer the question, or maybe I'll direct to one of you specifically, but I'm going to throw this one up to everyone first. If a robbery occurs at time of cash transport, say loading or in transit, who's liable and or whose coverage is on the line? So it's at the time of transport.
Well, when it comes to coverage on my end,
Mhm.
yeah, when it comes to coverage, if we're transporting inventory or product or cash, it's going to be covered through a cargo transit policy or stock throughput policy. These policies do have controls that Mike and Tony spoke of. We have to have a secured vehicle, depending on the value or volume that we are going to be transporting. It basically may have 2 people required to be in the vehicle. So the value determines the amount of people, the security within the vehicle, cages, GPS, locking mechanisms. We pretty much tell people, and Tony reinforced it, you need to protect your cannabis like diamonds. You need to think about it like diamonds, and every control needs to be done. When you have a vehicle, it needs to be thought about like an armored car. The robbery is not usually ever taking place at a location. It is taking place in transit. It is usually a hostage situation. Your employees do need to be trained on what to do. And if you have insurance and the controls in place, you need to have the SOPs in place to have your employees relinquish product and or vehicle so that their safety is okay. That is what the insurance is for. It is for peace of mind. It is a risk transfer. But if you do not have the controls in place, you are now absorbing another liability that could be protected by insurance. Mike, Tony, feel free to jump in on anything as far as control of the vehicles. But when it comes to the exposure, cargo transit protects it, but you have to have the vehicle controlled and employees following SOPs to make sure that the contract provides coverage.
Great. Now let's move on to the next one. So what is the #1 thing to do to reduce armed robberies?
Oh, I think
I can take that one.
Go ahead, Mike.
It's- And this is my opinion, but it's access control. I mean, if I was to prioritize how to protect your business, and Tony and I both spent some time on that measure, it's access control. A robbery means unauthorized access to your property. So how do you control that? And we've given you a number of different things, starting with technology, starting with hardware, starting with procedures, also the card readers. So if I was to say the best way to do it, and there's a number of other ways, but if I want to prioritize, it's access control.
No, I think I would agree with Mike, access control. I think what I look at, just even backing it back a little more, is actually just setting the image of you're a facility that you don't want to rob. Again, I go back to preventing those losses. I think, the access control is definitely a key component of that. But if you ask me what the number one way to reduce robberies in a dispensary, at least, or even in a grow, is the appearance of that location outside of the building.
Excellent. Moving on. How can layout and design of a retail space contribute to employee and customer safety? Can the layout and design contribute to employee and customer safety? And do you see a benefit in separate entrance and exit points?
Mike, you want to handle that one?
Go ahead, Tony. You can talk about your diagram and I'll follow up.
Yeah, so I think that definitely your design can greatly help you with your margins by reducing total losses from occurring, and also in addition to that, reduce any kind of extra robberies like break-ins or so forth. I think a lot of times you'll put employees in harm's way. They'll be moving product that'll be observed by the public or people that are allowed inside the location, or you'll have issues when it comes to the emergency doors not being adequately secure. I think if you can, having have an entrance in where you check your ID and you're buzzed in, and then coming through an exit point and coming back into the same area, I think there's an advantage to that. I see a lot of times dispensaries design where you have all this security and then the exit door opens right out into the street, right from the dispensary, where anyone could just come in through the out entrance and defeat every piece of security that you put in place. And now they're already on the retail floor.
Yeah, and I would just piggyback by saying that if you saw that diagram, and I had talked about it in my remarks too, you have controlled access, you have limited access, you have restricted access. That needs to be defined is really important, and procedures in place for the employees to follow. Also, an example which was on Tony's diagram is a man trap. What he just described is, to his point, you open the door, you're on the street. If it's designed correctly, you open the door, you're into a locked vestibule. You've seen this before in establishments. And once the door behind you closes, you're locked in that vestibule, then the exterior door can unlock. That's a high level of security, but it's probably the best way to secure ingress and egress.
Great. We continue to get some really good questions. So what good does all this do if the police won't respond to active robberies?
Well, I'll take that one. This is exactly what you want to do. If the police aren't responding to active robbery, and let's just take that as that's a true statement, you want to be able to provide as much security to prevent someone from actually robbing you. And then say a location that has a very active response by the police department. This conversation is perfect for that type of company who does have that concern. Now, I'm not going to get into whether the police are going to respond or not respond, and I'll let Mike chime in on that part of it. But if you're asking me that question and you say, well, I'm working in an environment where the police aren't going to respond, then you better have a good security program in place, or you're not going to stay in business. Mike, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that question, that's reality. You're right. With crime the way it is right now, there could be a 10-minute delay. And that's just the way it is, right? Couple of things we talked about though, having a web-based camera system, for example, that law enforcement can monitor those cameras real time. So you have a robbery, they have access to that camera system, so at least they can see what's going on, even if it's for evidentiary purposes. Tony talked about license plate recognition, facial recognition, all that's recorded. So I understand the questions about response, but even though if they don't respond in time, because these things are over fairly quick, I think Tony gave a time of 3 minutes. You're still, the bottom line is to catch the bad guy. And with you having your security technology, et cetera, where it should be, that crime could still be solved.
I just want to chime in real quick to reinforce what you gentlemen are saying. I think it is even more important to do everything we're talking about to protect our inventory, people, and product because we do and have experienced a delay on the police department. So it reinforces even more why this is important. Because if you're depending solely on the PD, you're going to have a gap. And unfortunately, the cartels, which is where we're seeing a lot of stuff going on right now, they're no longer growing cannabis. They know it's easier to rob you. So the reality is become a deterrent and not a victim.
Great advice. Moving forward, so what is the most common robbery? Is it cash or product?
I would say cash, but I would say cash in any kind of environment is it's the easiest thing to sell, or the easiest thing to have. You're going to steal any product. It could be watches, it could be gold, it could be diamond. You want to you're converting it to cash at the end of the day. So if the one I see most is cash. Mike, what about you?
No, and I agree. We brought that out earlier that that's one of the risks to this business because it's primarily a cash business. Green goes with everything, right, Jeff? That's more attractive to the bad guys, cash.
Yeah.
And are you noticing it differently state by state?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, West Coast has more security issues in the cannabis industry than the East Coast. The states, as we got, Illinois has a good security program, and as you keep going, we're doing a lot of work in New Jersey and New York right now, and they're much more requiring than say Oregon, Washington, California, Colorado, because those were the beginning states. That's where everyone was learning from it. But I would definitely say it's more problems on the West Coast, less problems on the East Coast when it comes to robbery security, break-in security.
I just wanted to add one more thing. One of the things that we've also experienced, retail is what's been hit hard with cash, but we've had some very large cultivation operations that have been hit as well. And if you have finished stock that is sitting in turkey bags, it's as good as cash. It's sold in 24 hours. So if you have finished product, whether you got 80 pounds, 800 pounds, it's as good as cash. So you need to be protecting it just like you do your cash. Have it in a DEA cage, in a fully secured vault or a bank vault, because if it is penetrable, they will figure it out. And internal theft is also the biggest area we are seeing theft, whether it's the third-party security company and an employee or vice versa. Internal theft and the way you are verifying your employees and onboarding them through a clearance process and background checks is very important.
Great, and thank you for all the questions. I'm trying to get to all of them, so I'm going to keep on moving quickly. For 24-hour armed security, do you have recommendations there? And what do you think about also using dogs for off-hour protection?
Oh, I am not touching this one, Mike. I'm not
The only
touching
thing
the
with armed
dogs.
security is you need to understand what the background, if a third party is providing it, are they former military, former law enforcement, off-duty law enforcement? Are they properly licensed? How often do they train with that firearm? All those things need to be answered. And I know insurance plays a big part in that too.
I think the question about dispensaries I can answer is guards during business hours is kind of pretty much like you would see in any other high-risk business. I can see it. I like armed guards, but I can understand if you didn't have armed guards. But once the store is locked, by you putting guards there at night, what you're telling me is that you have a really bad security program. Because why would you need guards at 2 o'clock in the morning in a facility that should have adequate security, whether it's cameras, alarms, vault, as Jesse said, or anything of that nature? Same thing with a grow facility is understanding what what that guard is going to be doing. And again, I could see more of that, but guards 24 hours in a dispensary tells me you have a bad security program. And the only comment I would make about dogs is you tell a grower that you're going to have a dog running around their grow facility, they're going to have a heart attack.
Got it. So this kind of specific form 8300 for cash transportation. They're wondering if you can say what goes. They have some questions about what goes in part 1. Is this ringing a bell for anyone?
What state?
I'm not sure. Whoever asked the question, if you could say more detail about that question, that'd be good.
I don't recognize the form, but again,
don't
we're in
either.
35 states. Mike, do you recognize?
Exactly.
No,
So,
but there's gonna,
You go.
We can answer that after the webinar too.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Send in your questions. Tony's email is here. Mike, if you want to show a slide of your contact info, and then we might have one for Jesse as well after that. All right. So thoughts on remote guarding with geofencing, monitor, horn call down. Do those seem like good strategies?
I think any layer, I think Mike, you know, we talk about layers and designing security and layers. Geofencing, I think is a layer of your security program if you can do it. Every camera has the ability, or every IP camera has the ability to geofence. So it's not like you're adding any extra cost to it. You just have to design it that way. Mike, what's your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, I concur. It's back to that every example we've given, especially with technology. Tony showed you like different types of alarm systems. Well, if your glass break fails and you have a contact alarm on the window, if somehow they get through the window and it doesn't get tripped, you have a motion detector inside that room. So it's back to having a backup to the backup, because as we all know, technology fails.
Great. I'm going to keep on moving. So with a state that just started with medical, how would someone expand a security protocol for multiple locations? Is it duplicatable? What would they do if they were trying to scale?
Well, I think both I deal with MSOs across the United States, and I think, Mike could chime in with that too. You want your security program to mimic your other locations. You want to take one employee from store A and put them in store B. You don't need to have to re-educate them about that. So I'm a big opponent of the same safe, the same cash box, the same camera system usage of that, same access control devices. So I would highly recommend, and I don't know of an MSO that opened up new stores. I've seen MSOs acquire other chains that change their security from one location to another, unless it's state required. Mike?
Yeah, that's the golden rule. You want to standardize your operations. You don't want one venue doing something different from the other. You want to be consistent across the board. And medical is actually easier to control when you think about it, because someone comes there, they have to have could be a caretaker, could be the patient, they got to have their ID from the state, right? And you can actually control access as opposed to just recreational, where you're basically letting anybody come in off the street. But to answer the question directly, yes, you want to standardize.
Great. I think we're getting ready to wrap up. If anyone has any really important questions I didn't get answered, please do post again. I'm going to ask one more question for us to converse on, and then let's wrap up with any more key points and getting in touch with everyone. So what type of robbery awareness is lacking in the industry? What's the top one that comes to mind for you guys?
People could see you.
What I see is it's back to what emergency preparedness and it's training. So if you're vulnerable to a robbery, it tells me that you haven't planned properly for that emergency.
I agree with that. I think that's the same thing that you're just saying, is that if you design your security poorly, you're going to pay for it that way. I mean, that's really comes down to it.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is there's two approaches: be proactive and actually guarantee protect everything, and then you can buy insurance to do a risk transfer, or be aware of your inefficiencies and recognizing you're probably self-insuring. And that's the real conversation you need to have with your risk manager and your security firm to make sure what you're doing and how you're doing it, and you don't get caught off guard, unfortunately, when something bad has happened.
Excellent. Thank you everyone for joining us. This has been probably my favorite presentation so far as part of the CREC Directory. We have some very knowledgeable people on this call. Looking forward to doing more. Please reach out to us for support with licensing applications, finding new retail locations, and support with our large network of partners who are able to get you off the ground or get you into the next state. So I'd like to pass it around to Tony. I'd like to summarize one more time about your business and send us off to Michael and Jesse.
Sure. Sapphire Risk Advisor Group. We work in every state in the cannabis industry when it comes to designing your security programs. And obviously, any questions that you have about robbery prevention, feel free to reach out to us.
I'm Mike Verden. I'm the founder and CEO of the Lake Forest Group. I've worked across the country in the cannabis industry. I'll leave you with two primary thoughts. One being that when you think about your business, do a little bit of retrospect, look inside. You need two main things. We talked about security. You need to have a security plan. You need to have an emergency management plan. You need to have both of those, not one of those, if you're concerned about robbery. Thank you.
Lastly, Jesse Parente, 9 Point Strategies. One thing I will tell everyone is when you're actually going to be engaging on your insurance and risk management plan, make sure you're shopping your broker and you're not shopping your insurance. You need to be working with an authority, someone who exclusively works in the cannabis space and understands the difficulties and challenges that you will be coming, and then you can have a good business decision to put together a risk management plan. I appreciate the opportunity. I want to say thank you to everyone that was able to help. Michael, Tony, Roger, thank you for everything you did. I hope this information was very valuable to everyone today, and we're all here to be a resource to the industry if needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.